This week on the Paddock Press Report, remembering a training giant. 1 year since Christophe Clement passed away, his son Miguel talks about what it's been like leading the training operation. Stad breaks through in the first leg of the Irish Triple Crown. Aidan O'Brien also charts an aggressive season for his star. And the final leg of the Hong Kong Triple Crown features 8-year-old fan favorite and world's richest racehorse, Romantic Warrior, his first accomplishment at this distance. Kentucky Derby winner Golden Tempo's future stud location has been set, and the Belmont Stakes field continues to take shape. Plus, racing historian Jennifer Kelly weighs in on the talk of a possible Triple Crown date shift, and the summer showdown hype of the Stephen Foster continues as journalism could join the fray. Welcome and thank you for joining me for the Paddock Press Report. I'm Timothy Lateau. This week marks 1 year since the passing of legendary trainer and Hall of Famer Christophe Clement. He passed away a year ago from a rare form of eye cancer. He's best known for training stars like champion Gio Ponti and Belmont Stakes winner Tonalist. His son Miguel is now running his training operation. I caught up with him to talk about what this difficult past year has been like. It is an honor to be joined by Miguel Clement, multiple Grade 1 winning trainer, many graded stakes wins already, and just such a phenomenal person as well. Miguel, it's an honor to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Coming up this week, it's been a year since your dad's passing. How have you, your family, and your team been doing since then?
The team is doing well. The team is doing well, and family less well, as you can imagine. But we just try to take it day by day, and by keeping yourself busy, just try to take the next step forward. But no, it's not been easy, to be honest with you. It's gonna be a painful week, but that's because he had a lasting impact on many of us in a profound way. So it's expected. So that's the truth, to be honest with you.
Sure, yeah, definitely. And there's been, there was a very quick transition, obviously, since his passing, took the lead of the stable immediately, and you had that transition plan, set in place, ready to go. What was that kind of like, as you were, kind of thrust into the leadership role, immediately after just about a year ago?
Yeah, well, so I was very fortunate in the sense that dad's always guided everything in my career for basically to train. And even years ago, to be honest with you. And there was always the plan, and the transition was supposed to take place. And then it was supposed to actually take place, I think, a year earlier. But we both wanted for his sake to get in the Hall of Fame first, and then do a transition, which unfortunately did not take place. He actually lobbied 2 years ago to do a joint trainer's license, similar to Europe, where you have two people's names. And he tried several times and was rejected, but that's what it was actually his main goal. And the transition took place inevitably. Fortunately, I was able to learn a lot from Dad, and we spoke many times about the transition because cancer was not an overnight thing, and so it took us a long time to get there. And obviously, we had a lot more fun with him on my side, but the day was unfortunately expected, so we were able to plan accordingly.
Uh, you've had a lot of success, even right away. You won your first grade one race, just weeks after, and you've picked up multiple graded stakes last year. I think 10 different horses of yours on one graded stakes. What, has the last year been like for you, professionally as well?
So professionally was better than personally. Honestly, I won't lie. So my mom really stepped in, and my sister, and the entire family, to be honest, because without them, it would have been too much for me. It would have been overwhelming just from a professional and personal point of view. And then professionally, as long as you work hard, usually the horses help you out. You had a great team. That's no surprise. And thanks to Dad's team and his setup is what for the stable success. It's every year the stable is very successful. That's because he has a great team and a great organization, and just business as usual, to be honest with you. And then everything else, the family really stepped up because as much as perhaps on the face of it all, they take care of everything that you don't see behind the scenes. And when I say everything, I mean literally everything. So they just usually try to leave the horses up to me, and everything else they take care of it for me. It makes it a lot easier for me. So that's how we, divide and conquered. And how did I process it all? I won't lie, everyone has their own coping mechanism. I didn't really have the time to grieve, and so I just try to immerse myself in work and just get myself drowned with work. So it's not really healthy, but just keep going, and that's how you cope with it. And and yeah, we had a very good season last year. This winter we started a bit slow, but we were always slow in the winter time because we hibernate with all our good horses. And everyone's saying the stable in good form the last few weeks. Truthfully, just because that's the way our business operates. We really try to have them ready to run in April. Usually they need a run. From May 1st to November 1st, we try to have them ready and firing on all cylinders. So hopefully we have a good Belmont Stakes week, which we anticipate, and we have a good Saratoga meet, same as last year, and a good Belmont Spring. I think with the stables right now, third in the standings for the Belmont Spring meet, and we're lucky. They're running well.
Yeah, it's been a good season so far. Great year last year as well. Did you have a favorite race of yours from last year?
I think the Manhattan was rewarding. We ran three that day, and there's a good blanket finish between two stable stars, between Farwich and Deterministic. That's obviously a great one. But there were some that really, really, caught my eye and I was very proud of. I think a 6-year-old winning La Mejana, the Glen Falls by nearly 9 lengths was flattering, and sublime races at Kentucky Downs with a week apart, and I think they made just short of $1 million, running twice second in two Grade Ones, so that was fun. And no, to be honest with you, we had a great successful year last year, and then this year I think we're on par for the same. We're a bit slow, but that's every time. In the wintertime we're always a bit slow. We give the better horses usually a break, and we hire to have them ready now. So hopefully you can do the same, and we'll see in a few weeks' time if I'm right or not. But I think the stable's doing very well.
Or yeah. Talking about Deterministic and Farbridge, definitely two fan favorites. They always seem to show up, every single time. Deterministic has been pointing towards the Manhattan. Will Farbridge go there as well? Do you know at this point?
No, Farbridge won't be heading there, but Deterministic will. He's been training very well, and it's not going to be easy to defend your title in that race. But he's very good. He's top class. He pretty much, as long as you bring him out there, he's sound, he's happy. He does every time he performs. That's all I can ask for. And I'm very fortunate that he's in the team. He's for me at the moment. I think he's sitting on a big one. And this race, he needed a Fort Marcy. If you believe in numbers, he ran a fast number that day. But I think he's a better horse now than he was then. I think he knew the race, and I think it's going to be pretty much, I think, 100% when that happens. So I'm very excited.
Or yeah. Do you have anything that Farbridge is pointing to, or you think just giving him more time is the route right now?
Unfortunately, I'm going to need some more time with him. But he'll be back. He will be back, but just won't make it for the Manhattan. And that's a big week. Saratoga, I think we're running like in 6 or 7 other graded stakes or stakes. It's going to be a busy, fun week. And it's all about performing. It's always fun when they run well. It's not a fun week if they run poorly. But I think they're going to run well. I'm actually being a little bit more cautiously optimistic than I usually am because obviously they gave me the signs that they're doing very well. So that's encouraging at least. And we've been based here at Saratoga, and it's home track for us. I think if you're here and you're based here, you get them settled here, you have a bit of an edge. So, we've been working backwards for this week. So I think hopefully we have an edge.
Very good. I know your own resume itself will certainly have a few more lines added, I'm sure, after Saratoga. Your dad certainly had so much success at Saratoga, all across New York and really across the country too. He won Grade One races coast to coast, both turf and dirt. What were some of your favorite, memories and moments with him over his career?
Yeah, many memories, many memories, but always some good ones. Going abroad's always fun when you run well abroad. Um, the good horses like the Giopontis, the Toneless, like those are horses of a generation, if that makes sense for us, in our opinion. They're like great horses to be around. So just the campaign and just missing them by my side, to be honest with you. But I'm lucky in a sense that the whole ideology, the whole stable, the whole our training method, where we're location, and all that. He implemented a plan. He has everything set in place, and we're just lucky to be a part of the ride now. So we're not really reinventing the wheel. We have a good system in place, and just look after the horses. And we have great owners, so we're lucky we get good horses sent to us. And just try to do our best and win as many races as we can. It's very boring, but that's what we do. We just try to win every day, so we try.
Or yeah. Is there any real, major lesson or something, really significant that you want to share that you took away from your dad and watching him all these years and working alongside him all these years?
Yeah. So to be honest with you, the I think as long as you work hard, things pan out. But you have to work hard, especially in this profession. The more you're there, the more less mistakes that's going to take place. Because unfortunately, they train every day, and we work actually 365 days a year. Christmas and New Year's, Thanksgiving, they train. We train. So you need to work hard. If you work hard, opportunities take place. But I think it takes a lot more work than what some people imagine. If you really want to be competing at the highest level, especially in New York, you need to be on it. So I don't think many people realize how much he worked, maybe, but he really worked hard. And that work ethic hopefully has been inspired to me too, because if you want to take it to this level, trust me, in New York, they're very good. So you need to be very tough.
Sure, yeah, definitely. And are there any differences between you and your dad, whether it comes to training styles or even just kind of your personalities and who you are? I feel like I see so much of your dad in you and certainly the success has been seamless. But are there any differences that you think you could point out?
Yeah, I mean, there's always differences. But overall, big picture is very similar. And even that, every year would adapt and change. Sometimes you would agree with me, sometimes you wouldn't. And that's the whole point of training. Every year you should shift. Every few years, if you look at it, you can always tweak and change. That's because racing changes. That's because your racetrack changes, or horses change, or your bloodstock, or whatever. But there's lots of little tweaks you can do. Um, so always, you constantly evolve, and you're always tweaking. That's why you can see many great trainers. They don't have the same level of success as years take place. I don't think necessarily it's because they lost how to train. Because I don't think they adapt with the times or adapt in terms of bloodstock or knowledge regarding a certain way or racing or there's lots of ways. So you always have to adapt, and you always have to keep an open mind and keep learning. It's not saying that you're always going to change your philosophy yearly, but there's always things you can tweak, make better, shift, or you have to adapt with the times. So it's important to always be tweaking, adapting, and shifting, and you learn every day.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Well, the success has certainly continued on, and it was a fantastic year that you've had. What do you miss the most though about your dad, not being there?
Pretty much that. Having him by my side all the time. That was great. If you have any questions, you bounce it off back and forth. Anything. And you just he was very much the patriarch of the family, so that's a big blow for all of us. And he had a larger than life personality. He was very kind and embracive. He was probably one of the kindest individuals I've ever met on the backside, where he gave people more opportunities than I would have done, to be honest. Many people. And then he's also one of the individuals who gave me one of the biggest bollockings and scoldings in my life by far. So I think many people would agree with that. It was amazingly fair, but he himself was a perfectionist, and he just expected perfection around him. And I think that's why he was able to keep such a successful operation for so many years, is because he held everyone to the very highest level of standards, just like himself.
Definitely, yeah. I can certainly attest to that too. He, was always so gracious with his time with members of the media, and I worked for the Saratoga Special back in 2022. We had some nice stakes wins that year, I recall, and a big invasion that was one of his big horses, and yeah, he always said, and that was even one thing that he said too about changing and taking chances. I'm trying to think of what his quote was, but he said, why wouldn't I take a shot, at the Breeders' Cup if he had the opportunity that year with them? So yeah, your dad was always just so friendly, to us in the mornings and after races too, and always so giving of his time, and as you've been too, Miguel. So yeah, that's certainly been passed down as well.
No, it's very kind. I miss him tremendously. We all do, but we have to go one day at a time.
For sure, yeah. Well, I know, everyone, wants to keep his memory alive and continue to, just yeah, honor him. And, I'm sure your whole staff, continues to feel, just that same motivation to keep working hard, even, without him there, they have all their memories and, are excited to have you kind of leading the way, right?
Yeah, no, it's great, and that's why the Hall of Fame is great, because it's another. I just would have loved to have been in his lifetime, unfortunately, but that's very rewarding for the rest of us, at least. So I agree.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big relief, when I saw that in the headline that day. Well, yeah, really appreciate your time, Miguel. Yeah, best of luck coming up Belmont Stakes weekend at Saratoga, and then I know a big summer ahead too with so many different great stakes runners that you have as well.
We'll try our best. Thanks for everything tonight.
The first leg of the Irish Triple Crown was this past Saturday. Stade entered the Irish 2,000 guineas at the Curragh as the 4-11 favorite for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. Expectations have been high for the son of Star Spangled Banner since he was a 2-year-old. He won the Group 2 Coventry Stakes at Royal Ascot before going on a 3-race skid in Group 1 company as a runner-up each time. He finally broke through, though, in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, but he was no match for Bo Echo in the English 2,000 guineas as a 3-year-old. He stalked the pace from the outside and drew clear from the pack. Distant Storm was second for Charlie Appleby. O'Brien expects a rematch with Bo Echo in the St. James Palace Stakes at Royal Ascot next month, and says Stade's season could end down under in the Cox Plate at Moonee Valley in Australia. Well, it seems hardly possible, but the world's richest racehorse romantic warrior just added another item to his illustrious career, the Hong Kong Triple Crown. The 8-year-old already secured wins this season in the first 2 legs, the Stewards Cup and the Hong Kong Gold Cup, at a mile and a mile and a quarter respectively. But the Hong Kong Champions and Chater Cup is a daunting mile and a half at Sha Tin. The only other time Romantic Warrior tried it, he finished second 3 years ago. But this time he turned up the jets in the home stretch under James McDonald. The Danny Shum trainee swooped to the lead and beat with numbers by half a length. Romantic Warrior typically takes a few months off this time of year and then returns in the fall. Lane's End Farm has announced that Kentucky Derby winner Golden Tempo will take up stud there at the conclusion of his racing career. Golden Tempo is by Curlin, a homebred for Phipps Stable and St. Elias Stables. He has earned more than $3.4 million in purses. Golden Tempo is targeting a rematch with Derby runner-up Renegade in the Belmont Stakes next. A stud fee has not been set yet. That's typically set during the fall. Lane's End Farm did not say if he will race again at age 4 or be retired at the end of 2026. Of the last 4 Kentucky Derby winners, the only one to not remain in training at age 4 was a Mage, a 2023 Derby winner. Well, there are now less than 2 weeks until the Belmont Stakes to be run for a third and final time in a row at Saratoga Racecourse at a distance of a mile and a quarter. We'll take a look at some of the leading contenders here, of course, led by Golden Tempo, trained by Cherie DeVoe, coming off of that win in the Kentucky Derby. Of course, Derby runner-up Renegade, trained by Todd Pletcher, looking for that rematch. Chief Wallaby is trained by Bill Mott. He was 4th in the Derby. Of course, Bill Mott, the defending Belmont Stakes champion. He won it last year with Sovereignty. Commandment is trained by Brad Cox. He was 7th in the Kentucky Derby. Brad Cox's other stable star, Further Ado, who was 11th in the Derby, won the Bluegrass, is instead targeting the Matt Winn Stakes, a Grade 3 race at Churchill Downs. Emerging Market, trained by Chad Brown, was 10th in the Kentucky Derby. Patente, 12th. Patente is trained by Bob Baffert. He was 12th in the Kentucky Derby, also looking to possibly race in the Belmont next. Chip Honcho for Steve Asmussen was 3rd in the Preakness Stakes. Seems like he is the highest place finisher in the Preakness to possibly run in the Belmont. Then there is Oselli, trained by Whit Beckman, 4th in the Preakness Stakes. He might be the only horse to run in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown this year, and he is a maiden. I do think that Incredible, trained by Riley Mott, was 5th in the Preakness Stakes. He could look at the Belmont Stakes. Of course, the Preakness Stakes was a lunchtime decision for Riley Mott. So while I haven't heard reports that he could go to the Belmont, I think that Riley Mott will certainly keep options open for one of his beloved tracks. Growth Equity for trainer Chad Brown was 1st in the Peter Pan Stakes. Chad Brown has said all along that the Belmont is an option for Growth Equity, but it is not the only one. Talk to Me Jimmy was the runner-up in the Peter Pan Stakes for Rudy Rodriguez. He's considering running in the Belmont Stakes or shortening to a 7-furlong New York bred stake race. And then Chad Brown also has Otinio 2nd in the Bluegrass Stakes. He has given him some time and said that a heel issue is also required time off as well. Well, a topic of hot debate recently has been the spacing between Triple Crown races. Some people argue that maybe 3 or even 4 weeks between races are needed to get more participants in all 3 legs. This comes after last year's Derby winner and this year's Derby winner have skipped the Preakness in favor of the Belmont Stakes, although I should note that Belmont Stakes both times was run at Saratoga at the abbreviated mile and a quarter distance as Belmont Park undergoes renovations. But I spoke with a racing author, historian, and turf writer Jennifer Kelly for more context as far as what a shift in dates for the Triple Crown races could mean. Well, it is such an honor to be joined by historian, author, and turf writer Jennifer Kelly, such a celebrated woman in horse racing and just a wealth of knowledge. Always a great time to talk to her. Jennifer, how are you doing today?
I am great. How are you doing? I'm excited to be on. It's always a good time when I get to talk about the sport and the history of the sport. So
It
thank you.
definitely is. Yeah, always an exciting time of year, especially, Triple Crown season, and always looking forward to the next leg after, celebrating the winners of the previous legs. And
Yeah.
this year, obviously, Golden Tempo has opted to skip the Preakness in favor of the Belmont, run a mile and a quarter for the third and final time in a row this year at Saratoga. And Napoleon Solo, it sounds like he'll also skip the Belmont after just winning the Preakness last weekend.
Right.
Um, it, stirs a lot of conversation, anytime that the Derby winner especially, decides to skip the Preakness or, Triple Crown race winner decides to skip the next leg. Last year's Sovereignty obviously did that, and then he ended up winning the Belmont.
Right.
I just wanted to, kind of get your thoughts and talk through kind of the history of the Triple Crown because people, have been bringing up the spacing of races, kind of as a topic of debate, recently, especially with those decisions. The Triple Crown hasn't always been spaced out how it is, 2 weeks between the Derby and Preakness, 3 weeks between the Preakness and Belmont, right?
You're right. It has been various calendars throughout the years. When Sir Barton won it in 1919, they really weren't scheduling it to, hey, we want to have one horse win both. It was like the Preakness was usually the last day of Pimlico's spring meet, and then the Derby would be the first day of their spring meet. So they were not necessarily coordinating because they had their own agendas and their own plans. And so when Sir Barton won, it was the Derby was May 10th. And the Preakness was May 14th. And so legitimately the horse won, late afternoon on May 10th. And then they had him on a train by midnight. And then he was driving, riding the rails to Baltimore, which took like a day. And so within, 72, 96 hours, he went from winning the Derby to winning the Preakness. And it was like, that was the first time anybody had done that. And so then they started making calendar adjustments after that. But a lot of times it was because they did want the Derby winner or the prominent 3-year-olds to go to Preakness because for the longest time the Preakness had not been as valuable to racing as the Derby was. And then the Maryland Jockey Club made a concerted effort in the late 1910s, early 1920s to bring that race up to the same level. And so that's where you get this battle over purse money, and then that turns into the Derby and the Preakness being on the same day in 1922, and then that was a controversy. And then you get this shift where the Preakness was before the Derby for almost a decade, and then they shifted it again in the 1930s into the first Saturday of May, and then the Preakness is like a week later. And so the calendar you and I know really doesn't fall into place until the 60s. And so even in 1955, when Swaps beat Nashua in the Derby, and there were 3 weeks between the Derby and the Preakness, Swap's owner complained because he's like, that's too long and I need to run my horse. And so they ended up shipping the horse back to California. He didn't even run the Preakness that year. And so it's really interesting the way people talk about it now because they're like, we need to change things so people will run. And I'm like, it's a great argument, but you really need to look at the way the calendars are structured in historically, and then look at the way that the late summer calendars are structured before you really start thinking like, if we have, is 3 weeks between Derby and Preakness going to make that big of a difference? Really? That's just one more week. The month's going to make that big of a difference because, yeah, it's, horses ran in the races. And of course, people will say, well, they were raced differently in that time. Every one of Bob Baffert's Derby winners went to the Preakness. And for the longest time, he had, a almost perfect record where his Derby winner would win the Preakness. And I mean, and he had American Pharoah and Justify in the last, decade. So I'm just like, yeah, that's a little bit of the history of, of the calendar. It really didn't settle in place until 1969 thereabouts, and now it's the familiar 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But it's been, you know, it has never been beholden to tradition until we got into this more modern era of horse racing.
Or yeah. Do you think that those kind of early era Triple Crown winners, like Sir Barton, Gallant Fox, Omaha, uh, Citation, Whirlaway, Count Fleet, did those horses help to popularize the Triple Crown at all, or was it kind of, or maybe not?
Well, it just, you have to look at the eras that they're in. I feel like when you get to War Admiral, you see that the sequence has taken a specific turn in terms of popularity because Samuel Riddle didn't even run Man o' War in the Derby, and then like War Admiral was his only Derby starter ever. Like that was the only horse he ever brought to Derby, and I think he did it because of how much the sequence had gotten traction in terms of prestige. And then in the 40s, you get more of that expectation that horses are going to run in all three, And then when you get into the 50s and the 60s, Citation was 1948, and then no one really does it in the 50s and 60s, and people start going, oh my gosh, is this ever going to happen again? And I always think that the droughts between Triple Crown winners does as much to bump up the popularity as the actual winners do. So when you get to American Pharaoh in 2015, and there's this massive, will he, won't he, and then he finally does it, and you just see the collective losing of minds when it happens. I feel like that's as much to do with the spate of horses that actually did it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, fans have to wait a quarter
Yeah.
or almost half a lifetime
Yeah.
for that to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, look what happened when Cherie DeVoe won the Derby with Golden Tempo, and she's the first woman to train a Derby winner. And like Cherie basically went on this goodwill tour of, you know, every major American television and podcast and all this stuff over the last couple of weeks. And it's like the interest was peaked because of she did something historic. And I think people do the same with Triple Crown winners. Like if we were to have a horse win a Derby Preakness again, I think you would see people go like, "Oh, it's been like this many years since Justify." Like, "Oh, we have another one," and that sort of anticipation, I think, to me, argues more for keeping the Triple Crown the way it is than any sort of change would. If you see what I mean. So.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, we were talking about these, massive gaps, 37 years for American Pharaoh,
Mm-hmm.
20 years for between Citation and Secretariat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, the fact kind of still remains too that in the last 48 years, only, Bob Baffert's been able to win the Triple Crown since affirmed. Does that does that kind of like maybe dominance or lack of other winners, does that kind of have any concerns for you from kind of a historical perspective?
I mean, honestly, this is the ebbs and flows of racing. Because if you look at between Sir Barton winning in 1919 and Gallant Fox winning in 1930, there were no Derby Preakness double winners. That there was not one of those until after Gallant Fox won his Triple Crown, and there was one in 1932. So racing ebbs and flows, and I know people talk about the size of the foal crop and the way that we breed horses. Like these are concerns that we've had for the centuries that racing has existed in the United States. There's always been there's not enough horses, or they're not being bred a certain way. And yeah, you get people like Bob Baffert, who's won two Triple Crowns. Well, say Jim Fitzsimmons won two Triple Crowns in like 5 years with Gallant Fox and then Omaha. And then like, Whirl Away and Citation in the 1940s. I mean, it's just racing is cyclical. And so we're in another one of those cycles where, we've had a dominant trainer. We've had a couple of dominant trainers. We had, Dwayne Lucas too, and we've had Bob Baffert. And then we're going to go into another one of those periods where someone else is going to come in and dominate. And then the question just becomes, what is their philosophy on the Triple Crown? How much does it mean to them? Todd Pletcher, I've talked to Todd Pletcher before, and he's like, I don't go to the Preakness unless I have a Derby winner. And that's just Todd. That's just how he rolls. And, maybe one day he'll have a horse that changes his mind, but that's just how he is. And he's one of the most dominant trainers in the sport. So I think you just got to like feel out where you are in the cycle. what the particular trainer's philosophy is, how they feel if their horse is ready. And Cherie knows Golden Tempo. Belmont knew Sovereignty better than any of us could. And so when people make decisions like that, I know fans are disappointed, but I'm like, they're making the best decision for the horse. And isn't that what you want to start? You want the right horse to come and do this thing. And if they're not ready, you wouldn't want the Golden Temple to get up there and get injured because he ran when he didn't need to, or the same with Sovereignty. So I don't know.
Yeah. There's a
That's
lot
right.
of, kind of common talk about, should there be 3 weeks between races or even 1 month between races? Should it be, the first Saturday of May, first Saturday of June and first Saturday of July? What do you kind of make of those ideas when people pitch those ideas?
I I wonder if I just wonder what the unanticipated effects of that would be. Because when you talk about we're going to have the Preakness the first Saturday in June, and okay, but is that 4 weeks a guarantee that that 3-year old is going to be ready? Because honestly, when you get a horse trained up to the Derby, they're ready. They're as ready as they're going to be, and maybe running in 2 weeks is actually benefits them because you've already got them at a really high level in terms of fitness. So is 2 more weeks, are you going to be able to keep them fit for the extra 2 weeks? And then the same thing with the Belmont. Are you going to be able to keep them fit enough to do that, to run 3 races in 8 weeks, which doesn't sounds like a lot of time, but is the purse money going to be enough to keep people coming back? Are you going to maintain everyone's attention long enough to keep people from coming back? Because I mean, the this year's Preakness had the highest ratings that it's had in several years, and then the Derby was similar. And it's like, are you going to be able to maintain that if you change the expected sequence of events, especially at this time of the year where, we're in the middle of the NHL finals, we're in the NBA finals, like there's a lot of competition for eyes in this particular part of the year. And so if you start moving races, you're talking about, well, now what about the Haskell? Or what about, all these other races? And what about if I have a horse running the first Saturday in July and then the Travers is here, like, does that affect the scheduling of the Jim Dandy? Because the Jim Dandy is prep for the Travers, and then you get into Breeders' Cup. And what I tell people when we talk about this is look at how Breeders' Cup has changed how we do the fall stakes races. So you see complaints about, the traditional fall, features like the Jockey Club Gold Cup don't quite hold the same weight that they once did because of Breeders' Cup. And it's like, okay, so if that is a result of Breeders' Cup, imagine what changing the Triple Crown will do for all these other stakes races that we already value, like the Travers and the Jim Dandy and, the Dwyer, or, any of these races that fall, like Al Gold, who won the Preakness with Napoleon Solo, was talking about they're going to save him for the Haskell because the Haskell means more to him than the Belmont. What are you going to move the Haskell to? I mean, these are the things that I want people to think about. Like it sounds good, but if you're going to make the shift, are you going to make the purse money commensurate to keep people coming back? Because that's also a consideration. And then are you going to be able to maintain the handle and the attention in the same way if you change the calendar up? And I know COVID, people point to COVID, to 2020 in that year, that was a one-off, and it did show that people will, they will try to pay attention and try. In your hardcore racing people were there the first Saturday in September and they were there the first Saturday in October, but they still had programming on television the first Saturday of May. They still had programming on television, when the Preakness would have been run, because the broadcasters knew that people were expecting that. So this is like, I don't, my opinion is one thing. My like insight is, can you plan for any sort of unintended consequences that you may have from moving this around this calendar that has already been so familiar? Because I mean, if 1969 was when it started and we're in 2026, like how many generations of people is that are accustomed to this calendar, and then you change it. And it's like I just want people to think through before you make such like consequential decisions.
Or yeah, yeah. I think yeah, 2020, the year of COVID was a good, kind of case study too for what four
Hmm.
weeks between Triple Crown races does look like. There were 15 Derby entrants that year, and only
Hmm.
four ended up racing in the Preakness. And maybe that's all right, fine. That's almost a third of the field, but
Yeah.
what are your thoughts kind of on that? Does that kind of serve as sort of a case study of what 4 weeks could look like?
I mean, honestly, I it's hard to cast COVID as a case study because it was such an interesting, series of events that happened. There's so many things happening that will not happen in a given year, like this year. Like you don't have the same issues with travel, issues with, the ability to have people on hand, like those kinds of things. And it's hard to answer these questions because, people new people come in and they have their own philosophies and their own opinions about things, and this is such a it's such and so nuanced and so like ephemeral to try to figure out like, can you predict human attention, and can you predict equine fitness based on an anomaly that happened, that is a byproduct of a confluence of events that you cannot replicate, because we cannot replicate a pandemic. We cannot do that. Now we can attempt to, change the calendar and see how people react, but I there my thing about this is like, if you move the Preakness, there are all sorts of indirect effects that include tourism, jobs, facilities, things like that, that you cannot plan for without doing careful study. Because horse racing is not just the horses and the trainers and the owners and the jockeys. It's the hot walkers and the grooms, and then the facilities, and then all the people that feed them, and then the suppliers, and then the shippers, and just, and so when I think about all these changes, I'm like, can you figure out a way to extrapolate what the actual effects are going to be in a way that you can, plan for it and then actually make that decision? Because also, I think people forget that the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont are a sequence, but they are run by three different jurisdictions. And so you have to get Kentucky and Maryland and New York to cooperate. And to this point, they have, but they are not obligated to. So that's another question when you come to changing the calendar. Derby is not moving. So if Preakness says, "All right, we're going to move to the first Saturday in June," and Naira's going to be like, "Why?" And then they're, you know what I mean? Like, you got to get everybody to cooperate, and that's not always a guarantee.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's, safe to say no matter what happens, there'd be a lot of ripples, from any kind of change made. Um, I,
Yeah,
I think, yeah,
I always point to to prohibition, which is probably not the best example, but when prohibition happened, it had an intended positive intended effect in that we were going to make people healthier by not allowing alcohol. Well, the problem is, organized crime and other unintended consequences came out of that, which we to this day feel in some way, shape, or form, just in very indirectly, obviously, because it's been a century since all that happened. But like, I point to the fact that when prohibition was passed, you could not have anticipated the ripple effects of, companies going out of business, people losing their jobs, organized crime rising, and on and on and on. And it's like, had we had that information, would we have made the same decisions? And so that's why I'm like, you just, unless you're able to figure out a way to study and extrapolate, I don't know if you're going to be happy with the effects of of making a change. So
yeah, sure, yeah. Jennifer, you've I've done so much research on the Triple Crown races and on some of the earliest winners too,
yeah.
especially when it comes to Sir Barton and then the Foxes of Bel Air.
Yes.
Those are, two of your popular books that I've read. I've loved, gained a wealth of knowledge from those books, and I know a lot of fans really enjoy reading those too. Just talk a little bit about what the process was like, gathering this historical information that, is, in some cases a century plus old.
Oh, it was definitely a challenge. I had the benefit of I spent my first part of my career in academia, so doing this type of research was not that big of a stretch because I had already been doing it in a different form as an English professor, and so when I decided to write the books, it was okay. They're obviously it's a biography, so there's a sequence of events, there's a beginning, middle, and an end. So then the question is, how do you fill in the gaps between those, and how do you find the information to fill in those gaps? And Sir Barton was probably the most challenging of all of them because people did not preserve things in the same way between that era in the 1930s when you have this growth in newspapers and other types of resources. And also, to Gallant Fox's credit, his owner and breeder, William Woodward, loved the horse so much that he wrote a memoir about him, which made my job so much easier because it was existent. But with Sir Barton, it was very challenging because I would run into roadblocks. Like I went and interviewed his breeder's grandson. So his breeder was John Madden, and his grandson was Preston Madden. So if you're in the Lexington area, you know the Maddens. They owned Hamburg Place. And I asked Preston, "Do you still have records from when Sir Barton would have been foaled?" And he's like, "Oh no, we threw those away in the 50s." And I was like, "Okay, great." So it became a very challenging, to find some of the info just because there's an inconsistency in how people kept records, or there's an inconsistency in how people, preserved information and stuff like that. So I did a lot of, newspapers, daily racing form, books. I have a very healthy library, thankfully, because of all this. And then the same with Foxes of Bel Air, but that was a little bit easier because William Woodward had been so much more apt to preserve information and to, publicize information. With Sir Barton, his owner had declared bankruptcy at the end of the 1920s and then kind of disappeared off the scene. And his trainer had, there's a lot of changes that went on in their time with Gallant Fox in Omaha because Bel Air was so popular and because William Woodward was so integrated into the sport. I was able to get more info, but they were both just an exercise in patience. That you're going to go down a rabbit hole and something will come of it, and then sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. Because the book I'm currently working on is about the Triple Crown itself. It's about the evolution of it. And I was in the Keeneland Library, and if anybody is in Lexington and you get a chance to go to the Keeneland Library, highly recommend. Beautiful place, wonderful, people work there, and tons of information. And I was at the Keelan Library looking for specific information for the third book and came up empty after a week of not finding what I needed, which tells me as much as actually finding the information did. If you understand what I mean, it's like, okay, well, if this information is not there, then maybe whatever question I'm trying to answer, I've already answered my own question. So research is definitely an exercise in patience and an exercise in willingness to be frustrated and and being okay with that.
Definitely, yeah. And are you able to point ahead to any other, future books or any other future work that you want to share about, or are
I
you
have,
cool at this point?
well, I've got Crown. I'm working on a Crown Most Splendid, which I hope to be out in a few years. I have two teenage sons that are also graduating from high school in the next couple of years. So I was sort of like, I got a lot going on. After that, I have a list of potential projects that I hope to work on. It will all depend on my publisher and where I'm at that particular moment. So I want to do more work with women owners in horse racing because when I was doing research for Derby 150 and I was trying to find information on some specific women owners that have had Derby winners, it was difficult to find the information I needed. So I'm really hoping at some point to do a book on, you know, a variety of women owners that, you know, have been a part of the sport in the mostly in the 20th century, but since then. So that's something I'm hoping to do, like, I'm crossing my fingers that that will happen after Crown. We shall see.
For sure, yeah. Always fascinating topics with you and such great insight. I know so much work goes into the research that you do to make these, you know, fantastic pieces of work for the fans and for the people just, you know, excited to learn more about racing. You're just, yeah, a wealth of knowledge, Jennifer, and we appreciate all your insight and all your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
And journalism is now a maybe to run in the $2 million Stephen Foster Stakes, a Grade 1 race at Churchill Downs coming up at the end of June. It's a mile and an eighth race and features a star-studded lineup already. He was originally being pointed to the Met Mile on Belmont Stakes Day, but the purse was doubled for the Stephen Foster to $2 million. His Sovereignty, White Abarrio, Magnitude, Skippy Longstocking, and Baeza are all being pointed for what's being dubbed the Summer Showdown. Of course, these would be the top three finishers between the Oaklawn Handicap back in April, which White Abarrio bested Sovereignty and Journalism in that race. Well, thank you so much for joining me for the Paddock Press Report. Be sure to like, hype, subscribe, comment, whatever you feel like. We are just so thankful to have you spending the time here with us. Of course, new episodes every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll see you again right back here next week. In the meantime, we'll see you at the races. I'm Timothy Lateau. Thanks for joining the Paddock Press Report.